Good morning, listeners. My name is Christian.
And my name is Micha, and welcome to the Morning Ponderings podcast.
Seeking truth is just as much a matter of uncovering the possibilities as it is a matter of narrowing the possibilities down to find answers. There's a lot of podcasts out there where they are seeking answers or giving answers because they're professionals in their fields, but this is a podcast where we uncover those possibilities.
And our hope in doing that is that we can have a better understanding for people and how they get to their conclusions ultimately so that we can have empathy for them. So welcome to this podcast.
Yeah, that was relatively smoothish.
That's pretty good.
Take a little bit of editing, but
yeah, not bad.
Not bad at all.
So, how's your week been? I guess it hasn't been super long since we've talked, but
I asked you first. Though.
Oh, okay,
I
fine.
asked you first. How's your week been? You gave me a yes. It's not quite good enough to say good, but not quite bad enough to say bad kind of answer.
Yeah, it was a really strange week. It's just been weird recently, kind of like processing different relationships and how they're changing. And somebody from my high school who was like very close with my dad, and also was just somebody that I knew just passed away from cancer, and so went to their funeral yesterday, and it was the weirdest thing. It was at my old church that I grew up going to, with the pastor that I used to hear preach, with a worship leader that I went to youth group with, who's now like their worship pastor. Like, it was just like a weird trip, like going there, and then like seeing some of the old teachers that I knew that were there. It was very strange and uncomfortable, and just in the place where I am now with spirituality, and honestly, even probably where I was, even when I was a Christian, it still would have been weird hearing some of the things that I heard said from the stage. I'm like, man, that's okay. And it was just weird. And like in one sense, I was processing how like this is exactly what she would have wanted to honor her life. Everything that was said and that happened, like it was a church service basically, like there was three songs of worship at the beginning, and then like kind of telling some stories, and then like a sermon basically, and then like another song. And like it's like on the one hand, I know that is exactly what she asked for, exactly what she wanted to honor her life. And in the same vein, I like still am like sad partly that it almost seems like her life was overshadowed by
the spirituality,
a gospel message that that I don't want to say it was very generic, but could have been said at anybody's church service or funeral. And like she was an amazing person. She was an amazing person, and like I wish we could have spent more time celebrating that instead of I guess somewhat preaching to the choir, but also there were atheists in there. So
Sunday is every Sunday. Sunday's a weekly thing, but to recall somebody's life and celebrate it is something that's like that's what that kind of is supposed to be. Like Sunday has its place, but it's also like you said, it makes sense because especially when you're coming from that Christian background, there's this mentality of like, my life should be overshadowed by the gospel message because that's what's important.
Right.
And it's an interesting balance that needs to be struck, I would say.
And she explicitly asked for that as well. And so it's like, I wouldn't have had anything go any different, I guess. It was just like a weird, I think probably the weirdest part was just being in my old church when I haven't been to church in 7 months. And so like that was just weird being back in that, and also just weird seeing like how like nothing has changed here. Like I just wonder sometimes like how could we go through the last 2 years and like nothing changed, like at all. But
that's something that's always bothered me. It's a completely different like train of thought that we don't need to get into, but like this whole idea of how how much churches pray for like change and a spiritual revival, but it's always like waiting on the world to change and never
Yeah.
looking introspectively at how can we change, because there's this mentality of we've got it figured out, we're in the right. If we were to change anything, we'd be compromising on God's word.
Right.
Whereas the reality of it's probably you're compromising on your understanding of God's word, which honestly I think everybody ought to. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole different rabbit trail.
Yeah. And so I don't know. It was interesting. And it's also interesting. Yeah, like there's like a lot of in crowd speech that when you're not in the in crowd anymore, it's like that's kind of a weird thing to say
Right? Yeah.
about people who are not in your in crowd anymore. That is honestly like kind of hurtful. Like,
Mm.
for example, saying like, a life without Christ is meaningless and purposeless, and it's like that's not true. But all right, and like I get
Hmm.
it. I've been in their same shoes, so I know the mindset, but
Yeah. I
it's
understand why
like
you're saying that, but it's
yeah.
kind of ignorant.
Anyway, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it's mental health has been a slight struggle the last week, just
Hmm.
processing some of these things. But there is good news. A week from today, we are getting our puppy. So I guess by the time this episode drops, we will have had our puppy for almost a week, which is awesome. And I am so excited for that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think I
yes.
recall you talking about how you and your brother and basically your family is a dog family. And
Oh
so
yeah. Yeah. For sure.
awesome.
Very excited. So there's hope on the horizon. Yeah.
In the
So
form of a floof, of a happy little floof.
little floof, very cute little floof. We haven't picked one. We're like between two of them, but we'll get to
Mm,
meet them and then kind of decide. But very excited. So
cool.
anyway, that was my week. How's your week been?
It's been interesting. So my son, I think I already talked about in the last episode how he came down with the stomach flu, which I'm
Yeah.
still working on putting the last episode up because I kind of forgot to prepare that.
Oh
So it's going to
no.
be up today. Uh, but anyways, my son, he continued to show some symptoms of sickness. Like he wasn't throwing up super often, but like early in the morning, he was throwing up for like 3 days in a row. But so my wife was really concerned about him. His poops were looking pale and runny. So we took
Yeah.
him to the ER to get looked at, and they looked at him. There was some concern that he might have, like on my wife's part, there was some concern that he might have appendicitis. But
Mm,
the medical personnel, the nurses and doctors said that it didn't seem like he was experiencing any pain in that specific spot, even though he was kind of pointing at it earlier. They were pressing around in it. He seemed fine. And it's one of those things where the pain progresses quickly. So
yeah.
it's been a couple days now, and he hasn't thrown up anymore, and he hasn't expressed any pain anymore. So if it was appendicitis, I think he would be in a lot of pain now.
Right.
But
Yeah.
anyways, so that was a whole stressful situation. Now it seems
Yeah.
like everybody's coming down with the stomach flu, and they're kind of short staffed at the school my wife works at.
Yeah.
But they're also short on students, so it works out. Uh,
Hmm.
my youngest has a we're it's classified now as a mole on his head, but weren't sure about it, so we got a pediatric appointment put together for him to get looked at. So kids and health, man, it's a bit crazy.
Oh man. Yeah.
Um, I don't know how much to share about this particular topic, so I'm going to keep it kind of broad. But there was a period of time that my wife and I kind of stepped away from the church we had been attending for her whole life, and since I moved here, more or less. And so we had stepped away for a little while, and we recently have started to reattend because there's things that have changed, and we're wondering to what extent that means things have changed.
Hmm.
So we're there now. We're present for our own reasons. It is a bit strange because our opinions are starkly different than the opinions of the church we're attending.
Yeah.
Um, so it's interesting. We're gonna be sitting down with one of the big changes is a our old pastor is retired and the new pastor's coming in and taking his place.
Gotcha.
So at some point, we're going to be meeting up with the new pastor and the older pastor and kind of talking about everything that went down. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. But I think that's about as much as there is to share about that I think my wife would be comfortable with it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like you were saying, that's integration on our part when it comes to like figuring out, okay, what sort of changes are there? What has been made? That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, best of luck with that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know all this. That's a lot of stress, dude. Like health stuff and church stuff, and it's stressful. It's all stressful. It's like my wife, like, because like we ran into an old teacher, and she was like super excited to see us, and of course she was like, "Where are you guys at now?" It's like, well, we just bought a house close to here, like not super close. We're like half an hour from that town that like we used to live in, that the church is in. And she like wants to get coffee with my wife, and it's like a weird thing because it's like on the one hand it's like you're a really sweet person, but you don't know about us now, and when you find out, I don't know how you're gonna react, and like it's a weird. I know that this like part is gonna be different than your experience, but like it's a weird like you have like these people have an image of who we are and who we used to be, because like we were very much like examples at this school, because it was a Christian high school. We were like the ones who did it all right, you know, and like got married and like all this stuff, and now we are not. And so like it's weird having that like image on you and then like feeling like you're letting everyone down. Like when they find out, like some of my old high school friends just kind of found out through the grapevine, because I mean, I talk about it publicly, so it's bound to like get out. And and it was like just a weird thing, because they're like, I know I can't have the same relationship with them, and I wouldn't have been able to even if they hadn't found out. But now that they have found out, it's like, I don't know. It's like it's kind of sad, but also it's like, why does it matter? I wasn't probably gonna have a relationship with them anyway. But
it's relationships are strange, especially in this time. Like I've been told by a handful of people like that vaguely more people listen to my podcast and look at my TikToks than I might expect. And so it's weird to think that like there are like who like I can kind of somewhat tell like, oh, you probably have no idea what my opinions on a lot of things are because of the way you're talking with me and the conversations we're having. But it's like, but who does? Like, which of the people around me and in my life like listen to my content and have opinions about it, and which ones are going to talk with me about it at some point? I don't know. But that's one of those weird things. It's just a point of unknown.
Right. So people in your life have like said that?
I think just my family has made me aware, like, hey, just so you know, there's people that listen to your stuff. That's you might be surprised at how many people actually listen to your podcast and listen to your TikToks. Which, speaking of TikToks, it's not private anymore. Granted.
All right.
I did a completely. I wiped the slate clean of all of the content that I have that is religiously focused. But I am intending, I think we'll see, to make more content, trying to approach it in a way that seems less threatening, and is still just as hopefully productive, because I feel like that's kind of where my life is right now, is uncovering possibilities. And I want to figure out, how do you do that in a non-threatening way when there's so many people out there who feel extremely threatened by other possibilities, and see other possibilities as reasons why they shouldn't believe in or cling to or have their preferred possibilities, because their preferred possibilities are something that they presently think of as absolutes and
Right.
completely true. So to think that there's other things that are equally valid as possibilities is threatening to them and to
Right.
their worldview and everything. So how do you approach that in a non-threatening way? And I think the next episode that we're going to be doing with Josiah over the weekend or over the next weekend
Mhm.
is I hope to talk a little bit about that and some of the things I've e- examined through the
Yeah, yeah.
conversations I've had. But that's yet again another conversation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you might expect maybe more content on my TikTok. I don't know. Maybe I will.
Yeah,
Anything I make
maybe.
is going to be run by my wife. Uh, I I hope. I have a bad tendency to get impatient,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she is a very intentional person, and I love that about her. And I think it's
Yeah.
amazing. But there are some times I want to unintentionally just spew it out there the way I want to,
Yeah.
whatever
Well,
damage it causes. I don't know.
maybe once you kind of find your groove and find your like rhythm in that, then
Mm,
it'll
yeah, I won't have
become a
to
little
have
more
her
natural.
give me the
Yeah.
green light as often.
Yeah, it's like, all
We'll
right,
see.
you just stay on this track and like you doing what you got, doing what you should do,
Yeah.
I guess.
I honestly think that the content I was producing towards the end of when I went private with my TikTok was starting to be of the vein that it needed to be, but it had all the context of the TikToks that came prior,
Yeah.
which I feel like it gave a threatening edge or aura to the content I was making later. Because people would look at that and be like, oh, okay. And then they go back and they'd be like, oh, okay, well, this seems a little bit aggressive. And it was a
Mm,
little bit aggressive. That's what the algorithm promotes, I guess. And it was
it
bringing that
does.
out of me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
Oh well. Starting over, kind of.
one rabbit hole into
So
another.
yeah.
Yeah.
So today I thought it would be interesting to talk about this because this has come up in multiple conversations I've had with people, not just in the like post-evangelical world, but also in the evangelical world. But like there is, like I feel like a lot of people have been trained to like have a like strong desire for what you'd call a quote unquote deep conversation, and to
Mhm.
like only really find value in that, and like always like when you meet new people or whatever, it's like, oh, you just like want to go deep with them. And part of what is hard about leaving certain contexts of the church, or even just like kind of making new relationships, is like having that strong desire. But now I feel like I am like relearning like what it means to have
Mhm.
find value in conversations, and like what conversations are valuable. Like how do we assign value to conversations? Like are only deep conversations valuable, or are other ones valuable? And like how do we
Yeah.
find that? Um
I think this even can extend into like the realm of like work and stuff.
mhm.
Because I think within Christianity, there's this mentality of like, it only matters if it's about God. It only matters
Yeah.
if it's about
Right, yeah.
eternity. And so deep conversations become meaningful conversations is just anything that has to do with God.
Yeah.
And same goes for work. Like I don't know. That's one of the things I'm trying to reassess is like, okay, I want to make meaningful things, meaningful content, meaningful games or something like that. But what does that mean with my present understanding of spirituality and with my
Mhm.
present perspective on God and Christianity
Yeah.
and just the world in general?
Right, yeah. Like in that vein of like it just reminds me of how so often like it seems like there's just a lot of pressure like in your daily activities, or like in just like something you enjoy, to like insert God into it. Like I don't want to say
Mm,
find God in it because like I don't think there's anything wrong with just like I guess finding God and like the things you enjoy, but like intentionally like it's almost like it takes away from the moment sometimes. Like if you're just like enjoying like the beauty of nature to like almost feel compelled to if you wouldn't have been otherwise to say and this is proof of God's existence or something like that. To where it's
mm,
like, well what
mhm,
if you just enjoyed nature and like and
mhm,
if that was the end of that experience, like why do you have to then like have this pressure sometimes to like almost take away from that enjoyment? It's like maybe let me put it this way. If you were to enjoy that without like inserting God into it, there's almost a stigma around that.
mm.
At least I felt whenever I was in Christianity. Like if I didn't
Yeah.
say like, oh, like God's creation is so beautiful or like something like that, then like I was a bad Christian or I was just
Hmm.
like,
You're
um,
taking the glory away from God or something like that.
right. And then on the flip side of like if you're not spiritual, just like even feeling like you still have to draw some like deep lesson or takeaway from that experience when like what if that experience is valuable just for the mere fact of enjoying it and
Mm.
not because you can take some great lesson away or some great truth away from it? And why is there like so much pressure for that?
Yeah. Why is there this impulsive need to shoehorn God into every moment?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it does often take away from just simply enjoying things, um,
Yeah.
which I think is valuable. And I
Do you
think, go ahead.
do you find yourself in those moments when like somebody brings that up? Do you find yourself like when it rips you out of the moment? Do you start to just go on a rabbit trail in your own brain of like, yeah, I mean, I guess this could be something like that, but then there's all those moments when it's not. Like, for
Hmm.
example, there was this one guy I was at the pediatrician appointment to get my youngest looked at, the little spot in his head, and I ran into a gentleman, and he was talking about how like childbirth is a gift from God, and it's like miraculous.
Hmm.
And this is within the context of very recently somebody close to us, my family, had a miscarriage. And it was just
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
I was immediately torn away from the beauty of childbirth and the beauty of having children and raising them and thrown into this like now my mind's in this spiritual space of like trying to work out the problem of evil or something like that. Do you
Yeah.
find that that's the same sort of effect it has on you when somebody kind of shoehorns that in?
Yeah. There are times where it does feel like that. Or like there are times, I guess going back to like the nature analogy where like the value of that moment is can only have value because
Mm,
you inserted God. And like me just talking about enjoying nature isn't valuable compared to like what you said, just
mhm.
inserting God into it. So yeah, I think so. And then yeah, there are times where like people will say something that is somewhat problematic. And
Mm,
then you have to like go in your brain. It's like, do I want to argue with this person right now? And
right.
like then you're
Mm-hmm.
really out of the moment. Then you really like are kind of taken
Mm-hmm.
away from the thing that you could just enjoy or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's this weird assumption that occurs. It's like, I have this perspective of what's happening, and everybody else must have it too. And
Hmm.
so oftentimes Christians will kind of shove their take on that experience onto other people with the expectation that they'll reciprocate. And that's just awkward.
Yeah, it is awkward.
Literally, does anybody else do that? Not unless
I don't
they're
know.
mentally unwell, so far as I'm aware.
Yeah, or just like I don't know. Like it just feels so compulsive sometimes
Mm-hmm.
and unnecessary a lot where it's like, I mean, I get what you're saying, but like maybe this moment wasn't about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah. And so like one of the things that I think was really making me think about this is like through my life I've kind of felt like there are certain like relationships that or at least like maybe it's just people I've had a relationship with. We only how do I put this into words? Like we only like desire or find value in relationships that add something to our life, or that
Mm-hmm.
like add either like in like a mentorship relationship where you are like learning from somebody who is like teaching you lessons and teaching you how to like live life better,
Yeah.
or in like even just a friendship where they are like encouraging you to be better, like you like learn from each other, and so like you both are like adding value, but there's like not often that same value placed if you are I guess just friends in the sense of like you enjoy each other's company, hanging out is just fun.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no deep lessons that you learn with each other. There's no like you get into like these topics that will push you to like be better, or like I don't know, learn some crazy thing. Like you're just friends
Mm-hmm.
because you enjoy each other's company. I don't This is just me personally. Maybe you've experienced differently, but I don't see that very much. Like
Yeah.
I see people often only investing in relationships that then invest back into them, and not just investing something because it's just fun. Like you're just a
Yeah. Yeah.
fun person
I
to
mean,
hang around.
I am super guilty of that. Like, for example, my relationship with my brother. Like, I really appreciate my relationship with my brother. I have a younger brother.
Hmm.
Um, and our relationship is just that. Like, it is, we get together, we enjoy each other's company, we play games, and we just hang out. Like, I don't know if I've actually had like a deep spiritual conversation with my brother, like ever.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure if that's something that's like I would desire. Like there's that
yeah,
part of me that's like, oh, I want to pick his mind. I want to understand his take on everything better. But at the
sure,
same time, I love the fact that we can just enjoy each other's company and not have to have that tension of like, oh, your beliefs and opinions are so much different than mine. And oh, now this is awkward. Like it's
yeah,
great to be
yeah,
able to just be able to go to my brother and we can sit down and play some video games. We
yeah,
can sit down and play some Dungeons and Dragons or some Halo or whatever, just hang out and be bros. So
yeah.
it's a weird thing because there's that part of me that's like compulsively like I want to ask him what he thinks about like my podcast and stuff.
Sure,
But
yeah.
there's another part of me that's like, I don't know. I have that relationship in so many places. And
Hmm.
I don't have the
Right.
relationship I have with my brother in a lot of places. And I wish that I would. The thing is, like, when it has the essence of being deep, like I can
Hmm.
learn or grow from you, and it's more than just hanging out and having fun. Like, the way that my brain is wired is I am compelled and compulsed to like pursue that. And I have the motivation to keep up with that relationship. And I am just honestly, if it's not that, I am a horrible friend. I am bad at
Mm.
staying in touch. I'm bad at keeping
Yeah,
like
yeah,
staying it I am really quite terrible at that. And so I feel really bad because like I want to spend more time with my brother. I
yeah.
really, really do. But for some reason, I lack the drive to like put together that time. And I want to do that more. I feel like I need to be more intentional about that because my brother's a really cool guy and I want to spend more time with him. We need to play more games. But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool. Like I have that relationship, but it's still strange, like trying to navigate it and preserve it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Because like a part of us has been trained that whether like I mean I know you would like never say this because like it's your brother, but like part of us have been trained that like that kind of a relationship is not as valuable as others.
mm,
I think I think like a lot of things in life there needs to be a balance. Like we need to have people that we can just hang out with and enjoy stuff with, and we also need people
mm-hmm.
who are going to push us to grow and people that we're going to learn from. But what
Yeah,
often I see is like we abandon kind of those relationships that are just for enjoyment, basically, and only focus on the ones that are like adding value. And I think part of that is almost like I imagine it's probably a result of capitalism and like only doing things that like only invest in things that are going to invest back into you.
mm-hmm.
And so like moving away from relationships, like if you have like a hobby you enjoy, I feel like there's always this push to like monetize your hobby and like
Mm-hmm.
make some profit off it. Like, oh, if you like making or like knitting things, or like for me creating music, though I would like music to kind of be a career at some point. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like there's like so much pressure to like, well, you better start an Etsy page and like you better start selling that stuff. Like when like, well, maybe I just like this and I do
Mm-hmm.
it for me, and like maybe there's nothing wrong with that. And even though it is something that sucks some money away, why not like lose some money on something that I just enjoy? Because often like once you start to monetize things, it becomes less enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like if you're just doing it for fun, then like you get the pure enjoyment of it. Like me just like playing music by myself. I'm never gonna make money off just playing in my house, but
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy it, and it's something that I think adding joy to my life is valuable. Just
Right.
period. Regardless of if it gives me money or not, or makes me, or even like makes me a better musician. Like, um,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that a lot in the music industry where people like practice all the time because they're trying to become better and better, but in the process lose their love for music, and just
Yeah.
lose that pure enjoyment because everything is always toward some goal, toward some end. And I think that happens with relationships as well. Like we always seek out those relationships that are investing back into us. They're always like adding value back into us. But I think we often miss the value of just enjoying people's company.
Yeah.
And um, I felt that a lot in college because I felt like I had friends that were, it was like that mutual investing into each other.
Mm-hmm.
But like I still wanted, like I felt like something was missing from my life, and that was like just having friends to hang out and like have fun. But those
Mm-hmm.
friends I had that with wouldn't try to hang out with me, even though like
Mm.
we always enjoyed each other's company when we would hang out, but like they would kind of neglect our friendship because it just wasn't something that was investing a lot into their
Yeah.
life, and it like kind of hurt. Obviously, I'm like a little hurt
Mm-hmm.
over that, but it like did kind of help me realize the ways that I also do that, and the way that
Yeah.
I often seek those, especially when I went from having a lot of friends in college to having like zero when I moved um,
Mm-hmm.
up to a place I had never lived before.
Right,
Um,
man. Adulthood is lonely. That's a different thing, but yep.
100%. Way harder to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's
yeah.
it's yeah. It's so crazy how you can go from like being on a college campus. You can walk out your front door and make friends with somebody, but once you're out of that place where community can kind of happen accidentally,
Mhm.
you have to be a whole lot more intentional about it. And that's like tough because I feel like more and more people are getting introverted. And I'm an introvert, like I'm a social introvert, but like it's even like I imagine even for extroverts, it's tough to like go out of your way to make this investment. And I think it even goes back to what we're talking about in that like if I go out and I make these new relationships, is it going to be something that's going to be deep and meaningful, or is it
Mm.
just going to be this thing that's ultimately an echo in a cave? And yeah, it might be fun to play with the echo for a little while, but I mean, it's not. I'm not going to be able to eat the echo. It's not going to give me the bread I need. It's not going to
Yeah.
give me the mental stimulation that I crave.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And so then you just don't do it. And it's like,
Right. Yeah,
so
definitely.
have you found like any like tried implementing anything or systems or approaches to try and like make changes towards that and like be more intentional about relationships that are purely for the fact that you enjoy the other person? Or is this still something that's like you're trying to figure out and understand deeper,
Yeah.
ironically?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I do think I'm still learning in that sense. But I do feel like I am being more intentional about um just appreciating, just I don't want to say normal conversation, but like non-deep conversation. Like
Mm,
for example, even just like in our podcast, how we always start and sometimes talk like a half hour just about our lives.
mm-hmm,
And I think sometimes there's this idea that like, oh, that's just the like that's just the like catching up, like non-important part.
Mhm.
But like I've been learning to see like that actually is an important part, because like what's happening in just our lives and just like talking that out is
Mhm.
actually important. And I
Right.
now like want to find value in that. When like, yeah, we're probably not like teaching some deep lesson in it. We're just saying like, I'm getting a puppy and like this week was stressful. But like, it's
Mhm.
important to acknowledge those things, and like those conversations need to be had. And so like, I think it's somewhat just me stepping back and like learning to appreciate, um, even like the other day I went live with which was like unplanned, but like I went live with another friend on TikTok, and like for a bit we just like talked about, I think like houses and like music or something. I don't know, just like
Mhm.
small talk about like random things we enjoy. And then like, and eventually it evolved into like, I guess what you call a more deep conversation. But just like in those times, learning that like this doesn't have to be anything. I guess releasing that pressure of that this conversation needs to become something,
Mm,
and just
mhm.
letting the conversation be whatever it is. And if we just talk about like surface level, which I don't even want to say that, like just music I enjoy, the
Valuable
last
things
park
in
I went
life.
to, yeah, like my favorite food, like those things
Mhm.
are important too. And like that
Yeah.
conversation, I can still walk away and say that was valuable. That was a valuable
Mhm.
conversation, regardless of whether it taught me or anyone else some kind of big lesson.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that's where I'm starting. I'm just starting to like wherever my relationships are with people, learning to appreciate that as what it is, and not put pressure on that relationship to become something, but
Mm,
maybe
mhm.
just like if I just play board games with these people and that's the depth of our relationship, that's actually fantastic because I love board games. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, I don't need that relationship to become anything more than just maybe people I play board game with. Um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah,
Honestly. Yeah, it's really interesting because like man, I had thoughts and then they left me, but they're still partially there.
yeah,
In Christianity and just like in my life in general, for so much of my life, I had this like thing in my mind where it's like I need to have deep, meaningful things behind everything that I do, behind all of my conversations, behind all of my work. And it's important for me to do these things because it's important that I know things. It's important that I achieve things. It's important that I do these things. And the more and more I think about it, these conversations we have, the looking into it that I do outside of these conversations, the more and more I realize, like, I don't need to know stuff.
mm,
Like, just understanding that there's a lot of possibilities out there, and it's very unlikely that I'm ever going to sort through all of them to actually come to definitive answers on just about anything. For some reason, that's like motivates me to be like, oh, if I can't, I simply cannot have absolute answers on a lot of things. And that's got
yeah,
to be okay, because if that's not okay, then life's not okay.
right,
Everything's not okay
yeah,
because there's this impossible standard.
yeah,
And the more and more I understand that, and the more and more I come to peace with that, the more I'm finding I can just I can appreciate the everyday things. Like lately, instead of spending every drop of free time that I have, like, I don't know, writing blog posts, responding to Facebook comments on deep conversations, making a
mhm,
video game that's going to have some kind of a deeper impact, or making TikToks, I've been playing video games. I've just been
yeah,
enjoying Apex Legends.
heck yeah,
And so it's like, that's nice. And like, even with our conversations, like you were saying, the first part is so valuable. So
yeah,
much so that it's like eventually we might run out of or not have any good ideas for the second part for a while. But honestly, the first part of the conversation might just be enough. Like I could see episodes of us just talking in the first part. Granted, those episodes might not necessarily get as much traffic. Like the when I had first titled the holiday special one, where we kind of didn't talk about anything too specific, but we like had a topic in mind, but it was very small and it was kind of mushed in there with all the other conversation we had.
uh huh,
I titled it Just Chatting, and it got like a third of the amount of views as the other episodes we had were
Mm,
getting.
yeah.
And so it was like, well, maybe I should change that title to
Yeah.
something more specific, like the holidays. And so I
Right.
did that, and it got a little bit more, but like, I
Interesting.
don't know. So it's like,
Interesting.
right? It's so listeners, we're calling you out. You guys are just here
Yeah.
for the deep stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the beginning conversations, like we tend to get into like really interesting conversations about life and
Yeah.
really meaningful things. So it's like, I guess I could just title it one of those things, and
Right.
people will come for that. But it's so interesting how we even are we gravitate towards, oh, I'm going to get something enriching from this. And if it
Hmm.
doesn't look like I'm going to get something enriching from this, I'm just going to, nah, never mind. I'm just going to skip over this one.
Yeah. I think like as a society, we've been somewhat conditioned for that. Like, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, to be fair, some people do go to a podcast with the intention of learning something. And so like, you know, I get that. But like there are people who listen to podcasts where it is basically just two friends chatting and like laughing about stuff. And like there's no shame in that. And I think that is great. And I honestly think
Mm-hmm.
that is like a secret power that I don't have yet because I pretty much just seek out podcasts to learn things. But like I agree. Like I need to learn to better like just enjoy life sometimes and like not feel bad for playing video games where it's like this added nothing to my life, but that game was fun, you know, like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that comes from just like the like Christianity growing up and like what is it? You know, just like having to put aside your desires, having to put aside anything you enjoy and like sacrifice so that you can be a better person who wields the gospel, I guess, and knows the gospel. And it's like, you better be studying your Bible as much as you're playing video games, like all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. When it's like, if this God exists, like he made this world something we can enjoy. And I just can't see that God shaming us and being angry at us for enjoying the world he created, just
Yeah.
purely enjoying it. Um, and so, that thought has been in my head. And so like that's kind of helped me, even though I don't know if I believe in God, but like just the idea that like God would get
Honestly, it might
angry at
not
me.
matter.
Yeah, yeah, it might not matter. But like, would God get angry at me if I just enjoyed nature and didn't like uh get on my knees and say, "Wow, God, you're amazing." Like, what if I just was like, "Wow, this is incredible." Like that was a beautiful waterfall or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, am I now like, is God like, you better mention me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
when it's like, if God is everywhere and is in all things, then that's glorifying as well, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I think this also, like speaking of that, like when you're steeped into this like Christian mindset of like everything must be to the glory of God. I feel like when I was more in that mindset, I would look at like atheists or people who were less religious and just think, man, how hopeless is that? How like depressing is that your life is so void of meaning and depth that you
Yeah.
can't see the meaning and depth that's behind these things that are happening in your life and how it's all ties back to God and the glory and wonder of God. And it felt like it's so strange because on the other hand, the experience that this other person's having, life is becoming so much more rich, so much more vibrant when you start to appreciate things for what they are and like appreciate the details and not just the artist every time, if there is the artist, making that assumption.
Arguably, the artist should hope that you just appreciate the art, sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
yeah, go
Like
ahead.
honestly, if I paint something or if I put something out, if it were to blow up right now, it's because whatever I put out is good. People got something from it. It was valuable to them in some way. But then the second thing I put out, now I have to wonder, are people appreciating what I put out because I'm the one who put it out and they like what I've done before? Or is this also good? And so there comes a point where it's like, maybe honestly, I would want you to appreciate what I have accomplished more so than appreciating just me. Because I don't
Mhm.
know if what I did means anything once it just becomes about me and what Christians put out. Like, for example, Undertale. Are you familiar with Undertale, the video game?
No, I'm not.
Oh my goodness, man, you are missing out. Talk about like a really fascinating game.
Okay.
It basically it's a RPG of sorts, and it
Mhm.
really challenges the way that people like normally approach an RPG. And it's just super interesting. If you ever get
Interesting.
a chance to download it and play it, you should. But the guy who developed and composed said game, his name is Toby Fox. And his name just became big because Undertale became huge. And I imagine if I was in his shoes, like Toby Fox is now the name. What is Toby Fox going to do next? And then the next thing he does, like, is the attention that it gets because it's a good game, or is it the attention that it gets because it's done by Toby Fox?
Mhm.
So I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it can often be both. And that can be good as well because like you build a reputation and people, I guess, like you become a person that people associate, like this person knows how to put out good things.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what he just put out is like, well, that is good, like it can be,
Yeah,
I guess it can be both.
a balance
But
needs to be struck.
yeah, for sure.
It comes back to balancing a lot,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
feel like there's
definitely.
this bad tendency to shift the balance one way or another. And it's interesting, especially when it comes to like appreciating like nature and the world and meaning, like from an atheistic perspective. Like, what does that balance look like? Is it a bad thing that's you're just appreciating it without any tying back to? So I think that atheists, though, I think there is still a balance because
Hmm.
if it's not God, then it is the universe and the mechanics behind the universe and
Mm,
how incredible that the mechanics of the universe can come together to create something so majestic
right.
like this sunset or something like that. So I think that that's also a shortcoming on a lot of like the Christian perspective is like, if it's not God, then your life is void. There's nothing. But no,
Right.
there's still something. It falls back to something. And that something doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be hopeless and meaningless, but that's the expectation. It's like, I'm here because I assume it is hopeless and meaningless. And
Hmm.
if it's not hopeless and meaningless, well, that's a threat to my whole worldview. And it's just kind of just that negative spiral, man.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And like in my mind, everything's meaningless. Nothing has inherent meaning. Meaning is what we add to life. Like we seek meaning and create meaning.
Mhm.
And I think that's true for anyone, Christian, non-Christian. Like we are all creating meaning and assigning meaning to things that don't have inherent meaning on their own, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, which is why I think it's important for us to like, I guess, give the meaning back to things that we just enjoy, where often it feels
Mm-hmm.
like culture and like, um, often even Christianity can like say that it's not as meaningful full or not meaningful because it doesn't add something to your life
Yeah.
or yeah, teach you
Or
something.
hopeless. Like there was a time
Yeah.
when I would hear that and be like, oh man, your life must be so void of hope. But I think that people overlook like if life is meaningful in a different way that's apart from the meaning we assign to it, it's kind of hopeless if we don't like I spent so much of my life trying to find that meaning which exists outside of the meaning I give life. And I was not seeking out possibilities because I had been handed the answer.
Hmm.
And so to seek out other possibilities felt like a violation of that answer. But
Yeah. Yeah.
eventually I had to humble myself and realize like I actually don't know a whole lot. And these things that I've been handed, I don't even know to what extent they are true. I don't have a good reason apart from the fact that it comes from people that I have traditionally put trust in. But now when I have these conversations with them, trying to figure out why they handed me this information, they're not giving me good answers. So it's like, okay, maybe the meaning to life that I was handed isn't necessarily what I thought it was. And so if that's the case, then I'm not completely sure what it is. And if there is an ultimate meaning to life outside of the meaning I give it, then it feels hopeless, because it's like, well, now I have to spend my life seeking that. And what if I never find it?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I
For sure.
think what a lot of people miss is like, there is a whole lot more there. Well, I wouldn't say more, but there's pros and cons. If you believe that there is a meaning to life that exists outside of the meaning we as humans give it, then you're on a wild goose chase. You're gonna have to try and find that. And if it's of God, then you're not gonna find it unless God wants you to.
Yeah.
Whereas if meaning is what you make of it and you put into life, then it's all in you. You have
Yeah.
the power to bring meaning to your life. And it's not dependent upon the whims of some external force that may or may not actually make your life meaningful. And
Mhm.
that, for a lot of people, is where they find hope.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, they don't find meaning. They don't feel like their life has any meaning. Like they feel like God has neglected them and
Mhm.
abandoned them to
Yeah.
not actually have any purpose. Like, how many hours of my life have I spent just like doing nothing, like, waiting for God to tell me what to do, and
Right.
not and being frustrated because it didn't feel like God was telling me to do anything. And
Right.
so I just had to wait and live in this what felt like a meaningless span of time, and just wait. And so
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I
And
don't know.
like as you were talking about like the ultimate meaning, it reminded me of some Abraham Piper videos from like a while ago. But like if there is an ultimate meaning, then any meaning that I find or things that I enjoy are meaningless compared to that. And so
Mm-hmm.
um like you said, it becomes this like chase of like trying to find that ultimate meaning that like honestly, if you think you have found the ultimate meaning, like for one, I feel like that once again kind of takes away from any other smaller quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
meanings that you can have in life. But also like kind of arrogant to think that you of all like have found the ultimate meaning like
Mm-hmm.
of life, and like of all the thousands and well millions of people who have searched and like searched, that like somehow you have found it and other people who disagree with you have not, meaning that their life is meaningless. And
I
like
feel like my approach to that specifically, like, I can't necessarily invalidate that if a person really thinks that they have found ultimate meaning. So the only thing I can really do is say, awesome, good for you. I'm happy for you.
yeah.
I don't have that. I
Mhm.
don't. I've been looking, I've searched, and I haven't found that. So I'm glad that you have found that. And as much as like I could sure get into that idea of like it feels super arrogant to say that you have found it. Uh and I might actually be like, oftentimes if somebody does say that, it's like, well, can you share that with me? And then I get into that
Mhm.
conversation and they can't. And it's because
Yeah.
it's something that's been personal. And so it's like, okay, well, if that is a personal thing for you, then I'm happy for you. I'm not going to invalidate
Yeah.
you on that.
Yes.
But I just haven't. And that's maybe that's unfortunate, but honestly, I don't see that as a bad thing for the
Yeah.
reasons we've already talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's a good distinction to make. And like the arrogance that I see is when somebody says they have the ultimate meaning and that ultimate meaning needs to be mine, needs to also be
Mm-hmm.
my ultimate meaning. And it's
And
like,
everybody should agree with me.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
everybody, like not just much, like everybody. And like that is where, s- you know, like you said, like once you
Mm-hmm.
get into a conversation, it's like, well, that's great for you. And like, I'm glad you have found that. Um, but you trying to force that upon me, I don't think is cool. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, man, so we went from like friendships to the meaning of life. Like,
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I think there's this assumption for people who think they've got it figured out, that if they know what the meaning of life is, then of course everybody else is going to want to know.
Yeah.
There's this assumption of like, oh, I figured it out, so you and any who doesn't want it to figure it out, who doesn't want to know it, so I'm going to then take this information and share it with as many people as possible. And so it's so
Yeah, which
I
like
don't know
once
how to
again,
feel about that.
like once again, like you if you find meaning in something and want to share that with people, that's great. That's fine. But when people don't find meaning in it and then you get angry at them and tell them that they need to adhere to your ultimate meaning, that's where things are like that's where it gets I don't like that. Like
Mm,
in the sense of like um so like for example, if you just think this is I'll just use like a trivial example. But like you love painting or something and like you think painting is the best. You want to share that with people, you want to share about your painting. But somebody's like, "Yeah, painting's not for me." For you to then go in and say, "No, painting is for you," and you're just denying what's true for you. It's like,
mhm,
I actually don't enjoy painting. It's like that's kind of what it's like. Um
mhm,
like everybody enjoys different things. Everybody's going to like find value and meaning in different things. And to think that because you find value and meaning in it, that everyone else needs to the same exact way that you do
mhm.
is like to me
Well,
becomes
it's
somewhat
especially
arrogant. Yeah.
like a double whammy in that like when you think that you've got it figured out, that you have the answer, and it's detrimental. Because if you don't have the answer and I do, and you don't have it, then you're damned. You're going
Yeah.
to hell.
Hmm.
And so suddenly it's more than just I have this amazing thing I need to share with you. It's I have this thing that you absolutely need, or you're going to suffer without it.
Right.
And it's hard because like, well, if that is the mentality that you have, then I would hope that you would share it with as many people as possible. But the it I don't know. I don't know how to address that. The best thing I can think to do in my life is if somebody comes to me with those claims, is to talk with them about it and then help them to realize like maybe you're not as certain as you thought you were. Maybe it's not as clear cut as you thought it was, but that's not something that everybody can or wants to do.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
how do we even maybe it's just to each person to decide for themselves how they deal with that kind of mentality when it's targeted at them or aimed at them, but like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think it does become a weird thing. Like when it's like, I have great news. Let me share that with you. If you don't accept this great news, it's really bad news. It's like, well, I
right.
don't know if that news is very great. But like, I think a lot of that mindset does come from not exploring other possibilities and like not being open to, and that's kind of like what we said at the beginning. That's our whole point is like
hmm
uncovering possibilities and
when
like,
you're fixated on finding answers and you show no interest in like considering other possibilities, then you just end up believing whatever either comes first. And if that thing that comes first is something that also is baked into fearing other possibilities and considering other possibilities, then you may never consider other possibilities.
mhm,
Or you just end up sticking with whatever you like the most, and then you just don't uncover any other possibilities. And it's like, yeah, if you stick with those and you're not willing to consider other possibilities, then keep it to yourself. It's a
mhm,
personal thing. But
yeah,
if you are willing to consider other possibilities and not close your mind to them, then share it. Sure. Have those conversations. They might be valuable to you or other people, but share it with people who are consenting to that conversation,
right,
who
and
desire that conversation mutually.
yeah, and often in that conversation, there's a unequal expectation where like that person expects you to be open to their ideas, but they are 0% open to yours. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not a conversation I'm here for. Like
Mm-mm.
if I'm going to have a conversation, I want to be open to multiple things. And if one of us is a brick wall, I would rather just not have the conversation. And like you said, you can't force people to do that in a conversation. And so
Mm-hmm.
the best that like I can do is like, hey, if you're not here for this kind of conversation, then like we don't have to have it. Like you have fun with your thing, and like that's fine. I'm just not here for that conversation.
Yep. It's the politics of that, whatever that is, it's
Yeah.
complicated and it's
Yeah.
messy.
There needs to be like it's not fair to go into a conversation where you expect the other person to be open-minded if you are not. Um,
Hmm.
that's not a good way to have a conversation. And nobody, I don't think anybody should go into things like that because it never provides good conversation. It really just can end up in an argument and one person feeling like they're talking to a brick wall, and
Hmm.
that's never a fun feeling. And so
No.
don't be surprised if that person doesn't want to talk with you again, and which is why I block a lot of people. I've been blocking a lot of people recently because it's
Hmm.
like there's a certain level of respect and open-mindedness that I require from people if I'm going to engage with you. And if you blatantly show a lack of respect and a lack of open-mindedness, then like there's no point. It's like, I'm not going to like say a mean thing to you, but we just aren't going to talk. And so,
Yeah. And I think that there's this mentality, this false perception of oneself as being open-minded, in
yeah.
that there's a lot of people that will approach a conversation having already made the assumption that they have the answers, that they have the truth, that they know what it is. And they think that they're open-minded because they're willing to consider, or rather to talk about your incorrect, faulty take on it. They're willing to
Mhm.
talk about it and talk about its faults and talk about its shortcomings, because there's a lot, especially when it comes to God, there's a lot of possibilities out there. So every possibility is going to have its shortcomings and its faults. And
Mhm.
they think that because they're willing to talk about the shortcomings and faults of all these other ones, that means they're open-minded. But in the reality, they've already made up their mind as to what's true. They're not about to question that. They're not about to look at the shortcomings and faults of what they've settled on as being true,
Mm.
because to them, it's just a waste of time, unless it's something that's like, oh, ultimately coming back to just reinforcing what I already believe.
Right.
If it's not that, then it's just a waste of time, because there's definitely there's a reason, there's an answer out there. Like, yeah, maybe there's this fault in my understanding of this thing, but it's true, so there's going to be an answer.
Right.
I just assume that there's an explanation for this,
Yeah.
and that's not open-mindedness. That is still very closed-minded. If
Yeah, it is.
you're if you assume that you already have the answers and there's no chance of that changing, then it's not an open-minded conversation.
No. And like once again, you do you, but I ain't doing that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna have that conversation. And like I guess like the way that this like plays out in a really negative way is like you don't have empathy for people who think different than you because you think you've got it, right? And so like even if you have a conversation with somebody, you're not really listening for their perspective. You're most likely listening for the faults and the flaws. And
Mm-hmm.
like you're not having empathy for how that person even got to that conclusion in the first place, or like why that belief they have maybe adds value to their life. It's not even really listening at that point, like it, and that does become very detrimental to relationships and to um honestly just having any kind of like progress in humanity is like not having any empathy for
Mm-hmm.
people. And so like regardless of where you stand, like you can be confident in your beliefs and still be open minded. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
have things you believe in and like hold to and values that you hold to, but still be open minded and still learn from other people. And anyway, I wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Like there's no problem in having confidence in what you believe, but
Yeah.
you gotta
It
also like listen to people and have empathy.
exactly. Like, if there's anything I hope that this podcast accomplishes for people, it's demonstrating the fact that it is possible and it is okay to not have all the answers, to not have it figured out, to not take a strong position towards everything. I think one of the faults that I had at one point in my life was I thought I had all the answers, and I thought anybody who had a different opinion than me also thought they had all the answers. And this idea of there being this space of unknown and that being an okay place to be. Like, if you're in a space of unknown, it's just because you are stubborn, and it's not because you actually have good reason to be in that space of unknown. Like I, for a long time, thought that way. And
Yeah.
it took a lot for me to finally realize, like, not only do I exist in that space of not knowing everything and not being able to be certain or have absolute knowledge, but that's not a bad thing. And I hope that these
Yeah.
conversations can demonstrate that and help people to break out of that delusion of like, there has to be answers and I have to have the answers. And it's not okay if I don't have the answers. It's okay not to have the answers. It's probably more healthy and better to just have a load of possibilities that you understand and recognize than it is that you have the answers. Because not honestly, I think it's more important for a lot of people because not everybody has the time and resources needed to find the answers that they seek.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
like this is a whole other topic, so we won't get into it. And we should probably wrap up soon. But
Yeah.
like when you are so set on things and like so closed-minded, it's very easy for people to manipulate you. Like it's very easy because they can say
Mm-hmm.
what, like if you, for example, people who are like completely closed-minded about things like the vaccine or like things like that, somebody can throw out a complete lie, like a just complete straight up lie, and you'll believe it because you want to, and you already feel like you have the answer.
It
And
makes sense with the answer you've settled on.
right, and so like
And so it must be true.
it's very easy for people to manipulate you and to throw out literal lies, and you won't question it because you already have settled on an answer. And so like that's why regardless of where you stand with things is like important to have an open mind and like consider all things because there's a lot of lies out there, not just about the vaccine, but like lots of things in life, spirituality, like just everything we've talked about. But that's
Mm-hmm.
another topic. That's like a whole other deal. But
All right. All righty. So I guess we'll wrap up then.
sounds good. Yeah, this was good. Once again, I feel like I was able to process some things in real
Yeah,
time.
same.
But
Mm-hmm.
well, if you want to find us and connect with us, you can find me at Pondering Together on TikTok.
You can find me at the truth, or not the truth word. You can find me at Truth Voyager on TikTok. I might be putting stuff up there again. Who knows? You can also find a video game I made on the App Store called Zompao 2.
Which
If you
I've now
want to
beat
give that
two
a try.
levels of it.
Yes, he has.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep. You guys gave
Um,
me a little bit of a review the other episode. I appreciate that.
yeah, definitely. It's giving you a shout out. Um, and we also have a YouTube version of this. So if you want to leave a comment and add to the conversation, then you can find that there, or you could find us on one of the other platforms
Mhm.
and connect with us there.
Yes, we have a third co-host who wasn't able to join us today. His name's Josiah. He's Micah's brother. You can find him at Something Matters on TikTok.
Yes. And in the bio of or the description of the episode, there is a link to support us in any way if you so desire.
Yeah. And I think I'm a bit behind on the YouTube videos uploading, but now that my internet's been upgraded, maybe that'll be a quicker process and I'll actually have more motivation to get on top of that. So sorry that there's a couple episodes behind, but I hope to get that up soon.
All right. Well, we will talk to y'all in a couple weeks.
Yep. Have a great one. I don't know.
Hold on. What's going on with my nose today? But meaning is, no, that's everything. No, what? Start over.